taking a little bit of a breather today so I can rest my body and my mind. But it seems the stories never end here on Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. So, let's get you settled in for some great stories and some great times. This first story comes to us from Damaki, 1981, and it's about a little-known aspect of the woods, one you might miss if you're not on the right path. Let's hear a little bit about the wishing well.
I want them to die. Her voice was little more than a whisper in the still air. There were no more tears, but the tracks were there, catching the moonlight on her skin. The blood had dried black on her swollen lips. I should have stopped her. I thought about it then, and I think about it now. This was how it began. It was the night of my 10th birthday, July 9th, 1991. The last of the party guests were leaving, family and friends and ones and twos into the late summer night. I'd said goodbye and snuck into the back garden to play with my new football. We lived near the coast, so the taste of salt was on the air, a stiff breeze off the water cutting through the heat. Upstairs, my younger brother was playing on the computer. Downstairs, my parents were tidying up and starting dinner. A figure in the distance caught my eye, dark hair tied back, walking fast through the long grass and into the woods. It was a girl I recognized from school, Katie Bridges. We were good friends, but she hadn't come to my party, despite being invited. It wasn't really a surprise. Everyone knew how she struggled to get along with other kids. I had plenty of friends, but it often seemed like I was her only one. I watched her until she disappeared into the tree line. Where could she be going alone, I thought. There was nothing out there but hills and forests. "Mum," I shouted, "I'm going to Katie's, back in an hour." The lie was easy, and I thought harmless. I took off before anyone could reply to stop me, spinning through the gate and across the grass. I caught up with her in minutes. Katie glanced over her shoulder when she heard me coming. She saw me, but kept on walking. "Go away, Kieran. Leave me be." "Can't let you go alone," I replied, voice filled with the confidence of youth. I couldn't imagine that anyone wouldn't want company. "So where are we going?" I asked, jogging at her side. It was just another afternoon adventure for me. "Nowhere," she said, turning to face away. "Anywhere. Away." That's when I saw she was hurt. A bruise was forming around one eye, a deep cut on her lip, too, which she was trying to keep me from seeing. Blood on her sleeves and the back of her hand where she had wiped it away. I knew what had happened. Her mother had hit her again. Maybe her father, too. It was equally likely to be either of them. I didn't say anything. I knew from experience that she didn't like to talk about what happened. Still, there was a swelling in my chest to say or do anything that might help. She was my friend, wasn't she? But what could I do? In truth, I had no idea. I passed a few moments in awkward deliberation, biting my lip as I kept pace alongside. The least I could do was stay with her until she calmed down, I told myself. Then walk her home. So, on we went in silence. She wouldn't speak to me, despite my best efforts to enrage her or raise a smile. We walked for a long time, and I started to worry about getting back. I remember thinking it was strange that we hadn't reached the beach. What direction were we going? I had never thought the forest went on that far. It felt as if we were going downhill, too, which made no sense at all. Still, on she marched, eyes down and arms folded, me tagging along and growing increasingly nervous. The trees grew denser, the space between them darker. I looked up to see the sky was now overcast, felt the air growing cold. Katie hadn't seemed to notice any of this. Or, if she did, she hadn't cared. Just as I was about to suggest turning back, the forest thinned, and I saw a clearing ahead. We stepped into it together, a small hollow in the rolling hills, ringing the pale trees with bare branches. There was a stone well in the center, maybe 3.5 feet tall and 5 wide. Behind it rose a wooden statue of an angel with wings outstretched, hands folded in prayer, hooded face looking down. We'd both stopped. It was so still and quiet. I could hear us breathing. Overhead the clouds rolled past, an ocean of gray stretching as far as I could see. "What is this place?" I asked. Have you been here before?" She didn't reply, but I could tell by her eyes that she hadn't. We moved closer, dry grass breaking under our footsteps. I saw the sides of the well were mossy and worn with age. There were other pieces of old stone strewn about, half-buried remains of some ancient ruin. The angel itself was damp with rot and badly split. Many of the carved feathers had fallen from the wings and lay in the grass. "It's a wishing well," said Katie, walking slowly to the edge. Her eyes were glassy, her voice little more than a whisper. I tried to peer inside without getting too close. "Got a penny?" I asked, forcing a smile as I spoke. The place was scaring me, but I didn't want to show it. There was no face under the angel's cowl, just dark wood, yet I was certain it looked whichever way I moved. Katie had placed her hand on the stone, staring down into the dark. I saw her take a penny from her pocket and hold her hand out over the well. That's when she spoke those words, quiet but clear. I want them to die. My parents. I wish they were both dead." She dropped the coin, and we watched it fall. A spark of light caught on the metal as it turned. A piece of the sky snatched into the dark, pulled down to vanish in the silence below. There was a flash of wind, a feeling like we had plunged into icy water. I gasped for breath, shaking with the fear that had grown in me since we had arrived. We shared a look and turned to run together, side by side, back the way we had come. The sun came back out as we returned, but it still felt like we'd been gone for hours. I recall expecting a rollicking when I got home, but no one said a word. When I burst into the back gate, my brother was still playing on the computer, my parents still tidying and sorting dinner. I checked the clock and found that I'd been gone less than 30 minutes. Had I misread the clock? "That was quick," my mom said as I came in. "Pity Katie couldn't come today. Is she all right?" She gave me a look that said she knew about Katie's problems. Everyone in town did, but nothing ever changed. "Yeah, she's okay," I replied. I didn't tell anyone where I'd been with Katie, what we saw, what was said. Not then, not ever. Katie was woken up that night around 2 a.m. The house was quiet, but she could feel that something was wrong. She sat up in bed and stared at the door. There was a pull in her thoughts, a call, telling her to come and look. She crept out into the hallway and peered downstairs. All the doors were closed. She took the first step down, listening. She would be in trouble if her parents caught her out of bed, but she couldn't resist any more than she could resist breathing. There was something down there she knew, something she had to see. There was a little light in the living room, but nothing made a sound. She held her breath and opened the door. Katie's father sat very still and gray, eyes open and staring. Her mother lay motionless beside him, face down on the carpet. They had both been dead for hours. That's how she told me it happened. There were other stories, but I never wasted time with them, and neither did the police. The local paper said the two had heart attacks. Katie was taken by her grandmother, a chain smoker in her 60s who had only met her once since she was born. I never learned the details, but Katie's parents had fallen out of touch with the rest of her family. Still, she was a kind lady and did everything she could for the girl now in her care. Her own house had been a tiny one-bedroom, so she put it up for sale and moved in with Katie until she could find somewhere suitable. The town pried and watched and gossiped, from the old ladies down to my school friends. It wasn't right, but anyone who's lived in a small town knows how poisonous they can be. I didn't see Katie again until a few weeks later. Her grandmother hadn't let her out of her sight since she arrived. She came over for lunch, then the two of us sat in the garden. My mom brought us some drinks and tried not to fuss over my friend. Katie waited for my mother to be out of earshot before speaking. "We need to go back," she said. I told another white lie to my mom, said we were going to Katie's, as her gran didn't want her away too long. Once we were out of sight of my house, we turned towards the trees, taking the same path we had the night of my birthday. We walked for almost an hour, but couldn't find anything. We kept ending up on the beach, no matter which route we took. Katie wanted to keep looking. She was desperate, and I understood why. But I didn't really want to go back either. That place had terrified me, but I couldn't say no to her. So we searched, back and forth over the same ground, until we were filthy and exhausted. We searched until we knew we would be in trouble, and even then, she didn't want to go back. She finally gave up when the sun was going down. We took a seat on one of the hillsides that overlooks our homes. She'd been crying, and I hadn't noticed. "Can't tell anyone," she said, "about what happened, about the wish I made." She was looking down at the ground to hide her face, a tremor in her voice. "Please, Kieran, promise me, not ever." I didn't hesitate. "I promise," I said. I can touch on this memory only lightly. It's a delicate thing, fragile and perfect, a ghost in glass. I see us sat side by side, gentle clouds above the warm grass below. The only sounds were the distant waves, a rolling whisper in dusk's tender hush, two children alone at the edge of town, dirty hands and secrets, eyes alive in the sunset light. In the weeks that followed, I tried to forget that place, the angel and the well. As enticing as the mystery was, I couldn't deny I was still frightened. Some things were better left in the dark. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be that easy. 2 months after his death, the grave of Katie's father was dug up and the body was taken. The same night, her house was burnt down with her grandmother inside. They found Katie in the street, alone, catatonic with shock. I remember that night. The sound of the fire trucks woke me up, blue lights flashing as they passed. I got up and went to the window. Where Katie's house had been was the flickering light of fire, above it and black on black as the smoke fell against the sky. My breath fogged the glass, and I wiped it away. Behind me, my father was entering the room, and I hadn't even noticed. He put his hands on my shoulder, but neither of us spoke, just watched. I could hear the sounds of the blaze by then, tearing and eating the building away like a giant animal come to life in flame. I saw the silhouettes of firemen, saw an ambulance arrive. The beast roared and the roof came down, swallowed into the blaze below. Then my father snatched me up, turning me away from the window, and holding me tight like he hadn't in years, arms wrapped around as if he could keep me safe from all the hurt that waited in the world. No one seemed to know the truth of what had happened or why. A veil of secrecy had quickly dropped over the events, which was understandable. The local police, who had never previously been shy of chat and gossip, were suddenly tight-lipped. Even the mention of the Bridges family name drew dark looks. As for Katie, she was taken into social care, as she had no remaining family. This meant she had to move into the city, as our small town had not so much as a post office. It was all people talked about, though it seemed to me they cared more about the drama than the girl herself. I actually heard people say she was cursed. They said it like it was a little joke under their breath, like it might actually be true, and they were afraid to face it. Even my mother, who always had a soft spot for Katie, began to speak about her as if she was something dangerous, as if misfortune was contagious, as if the scared little girl who had come crying to our door when her father broke her arm was better off gone, best forgotten. I remembered looking at the burnt remains of her house on the way to school, seeing where the roof had collapsed in over her bedroom, and wondering where my friends slept now. Even months later, as autumn faded into winter, people couldn't help but stop and stare when they passed, at the boarded windows and the black scars left by the flame, at the pools of rain and fallen leaves scattered amongst the rubble. The tragedy of it all seemed to have a pull on the whole town, something we couldn't leave behind, the cold ash heart of us. I stayed in touch with Katie, despite what people thought and said. My father took the letters I wrote and posted them for me. He never said it out loud, but I think he admired the loyalty to my friend. He and my mother argued over it more than once. I recall listening from my room, ears to the door, but I heard him say to her, "It's up to the boy. I won't have anyone tell him otherwise." I didn't see Katie face to face again until we were in our 20s. She came back to our town and found a job, rented a flat, said she felt like this was her home. It had always been her plan to come back, she told me. Through children's homes and foster families, she always knew she would return. We managed to remain friends, but it wasn't the easiest to find time for each other. I had college, a part-time job, family, and a close-knit group of friends. They all seemed wary of her, especially the ones who remembered her from childhood. As time passed, Katie built herself a life, working hard and taking her chances when she got them. Within a few years, she started studying law at the closest university. I was so happy for her. I remember meeting her every few months for drinks, my measly life updates paling in comparison to her own. When I was 23, I was driving to the airport with my girlfriend, Hazel. We'd been seeing each other on and off for a few years. Then in the last month, we had moved in together. A driver in the opposite lane lost consciousness at the wheel, swerving in front of us. It happened too fast for any real thought, just a split-second reaction. I remember Hazel's voice. We were talking about the flight times. Then seeing the other car cut across us, a flash of the other driver slumped in his seat. The impact, blurred lights and colors, the car spinning and turning over, and then another crash as we came to rest in the tree. When I opened my eyes, we were upright, surrounded by greenery. I could hear people shouting nearby. The side of my face was wet, and there was broken glass in my clothes and hair. As my head cleared and I saw the blood sprayed across the window, saw other small white pieces on my lap. There were teeth and parts of bones. None of the blood was mine. When we hit the last tree branch, it had come through the passenger side window, striking Hazel's jaw and killing her instantly. I'm trying, but these are only words, you understand. There are limits to what I can convey with them. Regret, guilt, pain, loss, all these things, and how I hate myself for feeling them when I survived and she didn't. I can't explain it. Hazel's funeral was the hardest day of my life. I'd never really experienced tragedy before. All my family and friends were healthy and well. Katie's parents were the closest I had been to death. People blamed me, and I knew it. It wasn't right, but they did. I'd been driving, and I'd walked away without a scratch. They would never say it out loud, but it was all over them. They stank of it. I saw it in their eyes, the way they held themselves, the silence between words. My parents and brother were there for me through it all, but there was only so much they could do. You can't shield someone from all the hurt in the world, no matter how tight you hold them. Afterwards, I told them I wanted to be alone, and they reluctantly obliged. I drank myself stupid, drank until it boiled over, screaming at the walls of the unfairness of it all. At sunset, I pulled on a coat and walked out into town. It was late autumn and raining heavily, but I didn't care. I knew where I had to go, into the forest by the coast, a coin in my hand. I was looking for a way to fix things, the only way I could think how. I walked the path myself, as Katie had when we were 10, through the woods and between the hills, head down and wrapped in pain, battered by wind and rain, desperate, crying out inside for a way to make it right. I didn't notice when the rain stopped, when the air had grown still. It was the trees that caught my attention, those skeletal branches. I stopped. In the failing light, I could see only hills and valleys, forest in all directions. Yes, I thought, this is the way. I put my head back down and kept walking, marching on until the trees parted at last. There it was ahead of me. After all these years, nothing had changed in all that time. The old stone well, the pale trees, the angel with the hidden face. I thought I could make out the footprints of 2 children in the dirt and leaves. Thought you might be here. I spun around in fright to see Katie, breathing hard, hand on knees. She was soaking wet, wiping strands of hair from across her face. "Couldn't let you go alone," she said. The words seemed frozen for a moment, a pause as the pain of the last week rushed up on me. Then the dam broke, and I stumbled forward, melting into her arms. All the strength left my body, and I sunk to the ground in tears. If you've ever felt like this, you'll understand. When it all comes out, and you don't care anymore who sees or hears. "I know why you're here, Kieran," she said. "It won't work." "What? How do you know?" I was still drunk, I realized, slurring my words. "'Cause I tried. My father, I made a wish here to bring him back, months after he died. But it wasn't him, Kieran. It wasn't my father I brought back. The pull woke me in the middle of the night, just like before. The urge to go into the dark and see. When I went downstairs, it was there, in the house, sitting where he had sat, rotting flesh and hollow eyes. It didn't have any teeth. The stomach was bloated. The smell nearly made me vomit. It had already killed my grandmother. I saw her body on the floor. Her face was cracking, brittle with the memories of her childhood. Then it saw me. It looked at me, Kieran, with those empty eyes. It tried to speak, to say my name. When it got up, I panicked. I locked myself in my grandmother's room. It was trying to get in the door. I knew I had to fix it. I had to fix the thing I had done. So I used a lighter and lighter fluid from her room and started a fire. Then I climbed out the window, went back to the front door and locked it inside. I didn't know what to say to her. Sat on the cold, dusty soil. Her confession had cleared my head. "I don't know how it works, this place." She got to her feet. It isn't always here. You have to want something. Want it more than anything else in the world. It had to be at sunset. You can't look where you're going. You have to keep your head down. I don't know everything you can wish for. Only some of the things you can't. You can't turn back time or make something out of nothing. You can't change. She paused, looking through the trees. You can't change yourself. "How many times did you try?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe half a dozen before the night of the fire. I was a child, alone, with the weight of those things. It was hard to stay away. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Kieran. I wanted to make it right." I thought of her back then, a 10-year-old girl, life slipping through her fingers. I had no idea what it must have really been like. "I know how you're hurting," she said. "I know it as well as anyone can. But this isn't the way. You don't want that for her. What happened to my dad? He wasn't a good man, but he didn't deserve that. What I did to him. I rubbed a fallen feather between my fingers, the soft wood breaking apart in my fingers. I knew she was right. This place is evil, Kieran. We both know it. It's a trap for desperate souls. When I came back to this town, I didn't know if I could find it again. But now that I have, I know it should be destroyed. We should destroy it and never come back, so no one else can be poisoned by it. So we did. We smashed the well to pieces, dropped the stones down into the dark, not one ever making a sound. When that was done, we covered the hole with hundreds of broken branches stripped from the trees. It must have taken us hours. Last, we pushed over the statue. It took both of us, rocking it back and forth until it finally tipped. It broke into pieces as it hit the ground, each rolling away into dust. We didn't look back, just left together in silence. When we reached sight of home, we parted without a word. I had nightmares for months afterwards, something I never suffered from before or since. I would wake up screaming, not knowing who or where I was. The things I saw in those dreams have never left me. A faceless girl floating on a bottomless ocean, body tattooed with dark words and symbols. There are hands just beneath the surface, thousands, millions of them reaching for her. Then, angels in a cold desert, surrounding a pit of earth. They pull each other's bodies apart and drop the pieces into the silent void below. They're screaming, but no sound comes. Only the parts of them falling, always falling, tiny lights vanishing into nothing. I didn't see Katie in the months that followed. It wasn't her fault, but she brought back too many difficult memories. I moved away from the town for several years, but could never settle. One morning, I woke up simply knowing that I had to go home. I had to be with my family and friends. My brother's wedding wasn't long after I returned. I saw Katie at the reception that night, sat alone on the steps outside the venue, champagne in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Despite her success, she still wasn't great at making friends. She turned to see me as I walked towards her. We hadn't spoken in years, but she smiled, took my hand to help her up. Then we were face to face, alone in the moonlit night. The sound of music and dancing inside seemed to melt away until there was only us, together. We kissed, wrapped in night and each other, as if from nothing. My life changed in that moment, finding something I never knew I needed. We spent the night together, then another. We moved into my flat the next month, and we were both engaged in the weeks after that. No one approved, but it didn't matter. We had never let each other go, not really. Even when the world didn't want her, I always did. I believed I had a lesson to learn, to realize what you have and hold it close. Everyone has hopes and fears. Everyone has their wishes and their demons. Can you hear yours now? Do you listen to what they say? Some can give you hope and drive you on. Some fill your heart with the things you've lost or will never have. The trick is to learn which are which. I need to skip on years again. So many it makes me feel old to write it. The world has started to feel shallower as I age. Smaller, narrower. There's less color, I think. Katie has a wonderful career. We have a beautiful home together and a good life. I'm her husband, though I sometimes wonder what else. Somewhere along the way, I lost my ambition and drive. I've been feeling uneasy for a long time now. It's been growing beneath the surface of our lives. Last night, I couldn't shake it. Couldn't get my thoughts away from it. I sat staring at the door. A pull in my chest, something telling me to come and look. Katie had told me she was going to meet a friend for a few hours. She often did, and I'd never thought anything of it. It was sunset. On the horizon, great clouds rolled in from the ocean, dark giants embracing the land. I followed her footsteps in the mud, though I didn't need to. I knew where I was going, driven by fear like a fire in the night. I walked on, head down. The air grew still and quiet, the trees thin and pale. I saw it ahead of me, the hollow, the well, the statue, standing just as they had when I'd first laid eyes on them. A path was worn into the dry grass. Katie was still there. She sat on the edge of the well, looking down into the black. "Knew you would figure it out eventually," she said. Now that I had arrived, I didn't know what to say. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop trying to make things better. But I made mistakes. Mistakes I couldn't fix. It was like a fire I couldn't put out. I stood there in the dust, hearing the truth I already knew. There were no twists or tricks or hidden evils. I got exactly what I wished for every time, and it ate me away. Now nothing's right. Nothing's clean. Everything I have left is poisoned by it. I'm empty. Can't you see, Kieran? Everything I have is worthless. She looked me in the eyes, and I could see it at last. All the years of lies and fear. I could never fix my mistakes, no matter how hard I tried. I wished my father would come home. I wished for people to notice me, to care about me, but all I did was make them hate me. I wished... Her voice cracked, and she hung her head, closed her eyes. Tears rushed down her cheeks and fell into the darkness. So many wishes for things I wanted ended up hurting people. I wanted you. I always wanted you. So I wished that you would love me. But it isn't real, is it? Because you never had a choice. So it isn't really you. And now it can never be real. And that's my fault, too. She didn't look at me, didn't even open her eyes. She just pushed forward and was gone, vanishing into the silence of the night below. I should have stopped her. I thought of it then, and I think of it now. That was how it ended. Now I long for something lost. There are no answers in this pain, no truth to find. It's just another broken piece of many. I close my eyes, and here she is. Eyes and voice and lies and fears. How much of my life was my own? Which decisions were forced upon me by the wishes she made? Did I have no choice in the woman I loved? If I can't trust myself, then what remains of me? What is left to believe in? I know she didn't need to make that wish. She didn't need to ask for something that was already hers. All she had to do was tell me, because I've always loved her, and I always will. Whatever's after this life, I know she still needs me, so I know what I have to do. I can't let her go alone.
Have yourself a cup of tea. It's really good. I like to mix my own sometimes. Maybe a little green and a little black. Maybe some peach or some ginger. You know, something to just make it the best experience it can be. Moving on, let's hear a story by Tristan Mason about a strange fella who lives out in the woods and maybe scares or devours the occasional tourist. Let's hear a little about the Winstead wildman.
The first time Sasha got high, she stood face to face with a black bear in the backyard of her friend's house. She was giggling while her two best friends, Jade and Colt, stood behind her, absolutely terrified. She wasn't sure why this was her reaction or what other drugs those edible gummy bears had been laced with, but the bear looked adorable, standing on its hind legs and raising its snout in the air. "Don't scream," Sasha said while giggling. It'll only provoke it. When Where I grew up, we had bears in our woods all the time. If you don't move, it will go away eventually." "You're out of your mind," Colt snapped in a harsh whisper. "Hun, I don't think that's how it works," Jade said, her voice trembling. She was frantically searching through her phone. You're really high right now. I think you should do as this website says and back away slowly, or scream if it comes closer, and throw things." "Scream and throw things at that?" Colt snapped in a harsh whisper. "You should call animal control, and we should never have come out here in the first place." "Colt, she's super out of it. Be nice," Jade tried to reason, still shaking. "Hun, try backing away really slowly. Colt, call animal control and the police. Maybe pick up something and throw it." Colt was shaking his head, muttering a string of swears under his breath. The bear looked absolutely massive compared to the 5-foot-tall Sasha, especially on its hind legs. For some reason, though, the furry black beast didn't seem threatened, as it wasn't even looking at the threesome. It was more interested in the injured bat that was flopping around on the solar-tiled roof of Jade's house. Sasha remembered only bits and pieces of her father's advice from long ago. "You guys need to calm down," Sasha insisted, not even trying to suppress a giggle. "You see something on the roof, boy? What is it?" "It's not a dog, Sasha," Jade said. "Back away. Colt, call animal control now." Sasha turned around and crossed her arms, not bothering to read her friend's expression. "You guys act like you've never seen a bear before. Good God." "It's going back. It's..." By the time Jade pointed in the direction of the bear, it had slipped into the narrow opening of the woods. As Colt and Jade breathed a sigh of relief, Sasha sat on the porch steps and reclined on them, her eyes fixed on the blurry, starry sky. There wasn't much she loved about Winstead, but she loved nights like this, even when she was drifting into a drug-induced sleep. "That was way too close," Colt snapped. Sasha wasn't sure whether either of them were looking at her, but Colt's angry tone, mixed with Jade's concerned tones, weren't enough to sway her from her sleep. "Maybe we should just leave her there," Colt remarked. "She loves the wilderness, apparently." "Come on, Colt. I don't want to hear the excuse that she's high again. She's the only one that ate 10 of them gummies. I feel bad that she's having trouble with Jordan again or whatever, but she made an ass out of herself tonight." "I can hear what you're saying, and I don't care," Sasha remarked. "You can leave me out here tonight." Jade laughed. "No way, hun. If the bear comes back, the trail cam will get it. There's plenty of them in Winstead. You're not missing much." "We're lucky to be alive," Colt said, ignoring Sasha's head shaking. "Let's go inside and go to bed. Maybe when you wake up, you'll sound like your more rational self again and stop sounding like your boyfriend." That remark particularly bothered Sasha, but she said nothing as Colt and Jade led her inside the dismal home that Jade had rented out on the outskirts of Winstead. Even with the solar tiles the landlord fixed on the roof, the place was still a dump, in Sasha's opinion, with mold stains all over the ceiling, boarded up windows, and a total lack of air conditioning. It didn't help that Colt was secretly living there and leaving garbage in every room. By the time Sasha stepped inside the dark guest room, the only room untouched by either of them, she was relieved. She was happy to lay down on the single olive-covered couch that fit snugly between two well-stocked bookshelves. Sasha took the night to sober up, tossing and turning on the barren cushions with broken springs. She couldn't stop thinking about how human the bear had looked, standing on its hind legs. She found nothing to fear about the bear, but thought about it with wonder. When Sasha was little, she remembered her mom telling her stories about the brown bears in the forests of Syria that greeted her as she walked through the woods and rubbed up against her dress. Her father, a lifelong New Englander, tried to explain in extremely cautious tones that
it wasn't a typical experience. Sasha didn't listen, nor did she have any fear for bears. She always loved bears, and still had the same sweatshirt of a brown bear from the time she was a teenager. High or not, she figured she probably would have approached the bear anyway. "I didn't know being high could make you the damn crocodile hunter. Jesus Christ," she heard Colt say from the other room. "Sasha's always been good with animals," Jade responded. With a tired laugh, they turned on the faucet in the kitchen. To Sasha, they sounded louder and closer than they actually were. She was starting to drift off when Jade continued. "The bear was absolutely crazy, though." "You mean terrifying," Colt interjected, pouring what sounded like a glass of water. "High or not, that girl has no common sense, and is turning more and more into her boyfriend every day." Sasha sighed. Ever since Jordan came into the picture, neither Colt or Jade were fans of him, or his YouTube channel about abandoned and scary places. For the longest time, it was just Sasha, Jade, and Colt, three friends who met their freshman year at Northwestern Connecticut State University, a college not too far from this dump her friends called home. Her relationship had driven a wedge between them. Being high tonight was a way to take the edge off their complaining. If she wasn't so tired, she would have climbed out the window and went looking for that unusual bear. Hours later, when her friends were sound asleep and Sasha was still up and tormented by her thoughts, she saw a figure from the window. It looked tall, like the bear, but much blurrier. It was standing in the middle of the yard. Despite squinting, she couldn't quite make out what it was. It was dark, like the bear, but there weren't any discernible features like fur or ears. When she squinted harder, she saw a tall, gray-haired man just standing in the middle of the yard. He wore a long, open jean jacket over a flannel shirt and brown cargo jeans. When she saw his right hand gripping a metal shovel, she gulped and felt her heart sink into her throat. Without thinking, Sasha grabbed her cell phone and opened the window, shouting, "What are you doing here?" Those words startled the man. His big gray eyes widened and he darted off into the forest. When he ran, his body looked dark and blurry for some reason. Sasha figured that she must still be high, but was sober enough to go into the living room where Colt and Jade were dozing on separate couches. "Guys, wake up, I saw something." Colt and Jade were in their clothes from the night before. Only Jade's oversized hoodie and Colt's cardigan had some sort of food on it. When they opened their eyes, Colt saw Sasha and grimaced, and as for Jade, she furrowed her eyebrows. "What is it, Sash?" "I saw a man in the backyard, a tall man with long hair." As she spoke, Sasha still had a sinking feeling in her chest. It took a moment for her friends to process what she was saying, but once it hit them, they were both off the couch and at attention. "I called him from the window and he ran away." "Colt, go check the trail cams," Jade said with a nod. "That's crazy, Sash. My neighbors saw a crazy man like that a couple of weeks ago, but she said the cops didn't do anything. The trail cams will definitely pick him up, though." From a brown knapsack on the couch, Colt pulled out his laptop and opened up the trail cam application. They watched Colt as he fast-forwarded through hours of nothing. When the image of the three of them and the bear came on screen, Sasha felt the urge to giggle, but Colt's look of exasperation convinced her otherwise. "About what time was this?" Colt asked, scratching his chin. Before Sasha could answer, Colt paused on a frame of the bear on his hind legs. "Sash, I thought you said you saw a man." "I did. This very tall man with ridiculously long hair and a jean jacket." "Maybe you need to fast forward a little more. Wait, slow down." Colt nodded and pressed the gray button with a single black arrow. It was the same bear they'd seen earlier, just standing on its hind legs for what clocked at a solid 2 minutes. Then it appeared to look at the window for a split second before getting back down on all fours and darting off into the woods. Sasha's mouth dropped open and she took a step back. Jade sighed and Colt slapped his hand over his face.
Well, that's that, Sasha, Colt snarled. You were so high, you thought the bear was some mysterious jean jacket dude. That's a bad trip. Oh, Sash, you had a real bad trip. I'm so sorry it scared you. No, I know what I saw. Fast forward. Wasn't this like 5 minutes ago? If I fast forward, there's nothing. Just a reminder that it's 4 in the morning and you're still high. I've been high before, but not enough to hallucinate. It's like they were peyote gummies or something, or maybe you're just crazy. Jade smacked him on the ear. Ow! The hell, I was kidding. Maybe we all just need to go to bed. Knowing that she couldn't convince them otherwise, Sasha had gone to bed. She wasn't having a bad trip, but a bad time. Now, not only did her best friends disapprove of her relationship, but they questioned her sanity. Unlike her boyfriend, Sasha wasn't religious or spiritual and didn't really believe in the supernatural. She also knew the difference between tripping and being sober, or at least she thought she did. What she saw wasn't caught on camera, but without any evidence, she still believed. Being in the last year of her biology graduation program, the notion of believing was deeply unsettling to her. Despite her better instinct, Sasha called Jordan the next day and told him about her experience. So let's review, Jordan said in a familiar voice that made Sasha groan. She didn't have to be there to know that he was grinning and pointing fingers in the air as if he had some brilliant idea. The three of you saw a bear in Jade's backyard that was standing on its hind legs. Late on in the night, you saw a tall, long-haired man that looked like a sage or something. And the trail cams caught footage of a bear. Yeah, Sasha said, uncertain of where this was going, but not wanting to know. And Jade lives in Winstead, towards the woods. You know all this, Jordan. What's your point? There was a brief pause before Jordan blurted out, You had a visit from the Winstead wildman. Oh, God, Sasha groaned. Like their high school sports team mascot? Oh, no, that's the Winstead Wildmen. There's a slight difference. See, they get their name from a local legend of the Winstead Wildman. It's like a Connecticut Bigfoot. As Sasha sank into the couch and let out another audible groan, she felt tempted to hang up and make an excuse about bad service as he continued. Matt Drake did a video on it. You should watch it. Okay, so legend has it that sometime in the late 1800s, there was a real proper selectman named Riley Smith who was picking berries with his dog. For some reason, like all men back then, he always wore a suit and a top hat, even when on a walk in the woods. But that's beside the point. Anyway, he saw a large creature that looked like a man, but with black fur all over his body and long hair draped over his shoulders. The selectman and his dog were paralyzed with fear and stood motionless till the creature disappeared. He reported the story to the Winstead Herald, and over the next few weeks, many locals reported sightings and the town panicked. That's actually an interesting story, Sasha said, scrunching up her nose, but I very much doubt that's what I saw. You believe in all this supernatural stuff. I respect that, I do, but how else can you explain it? Look, Sash, I gotta go, unfortunately, but be careful out there, and maybe buy bear spray or something. Sasha sighed. She loved her boyfriend, but not the way he looked for supernatural and everything. For a while, they had a YouTube channel where they explored abandoned places together. Ever since he met Matt Drake, however, he dragged Sasha on ghost hunts and cryptozoological searches around the state for creatures with weird names like the Glaucus or the Black Dog of Hanging Hill. Something about the Weston Wildman intrigued her, though. At the very least, she found it strange that the camera footage picked up a bear, and not the mythological-looking figure she had seen. Maybe she was tripping. She'd accepted that explanation before Jordan's. That morning, Sasha continued searching the Winstead Wildman on her phone, but she had no signal. Neither Colt or Jade had paid for the internet that month. They left a note on the counter that they had gone out grocery shopping, a typical Sunday morning for them. She started her Sunday morning walk into town. She found herself peering into each of her neighbors' backyards in search of a long-haired man or the bear. Every time she thought she saw something, it just turned out to be a shadow from the vast forest that surrounded the town, or another animal like a moose or a deer. She searched the town, high and low, for the man until the bells sounded in the church downtown. She felt her mind and eyes growing dreary as she aimlessly wandered until she reached the part of town that she did not recognize, that was lined up with old brick factories and buildings. The street was completely silent, the sound of passing traffic and birds and the crunch of falling leaves beneath her feet completely disappearing. The silence made her drowsy, so drowsy that she sat down on the curb in front of the large brick buildings that looked different from the rest of the factories, as if it was once a school or a town hall. The silence not only made her drowsy, but a mix of queasiness and extreme sadness. It became so silent that she thought of screaming, just to make sure that she could still hear. When she was ready to open her mouth and do so, she heard the sound of something scraping along the earth. Sasha turned around, knowing what she would see, way before she saw it. Those feelings of queasiness and sadness turned to absolute dread when she saw the long-haired man with the open jean jacket digging in the earth. What are you doing? Who are you?" she asked. She thought that she had been whispering, but the atmosphere was so quiet that the man not only turned around, but he brushed his hair out of his immense gray eyes and placed his shovel down. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you." "I'm looking for my friends," the man said, in a sharp, raspy voice. "Oh God, I should go. I'm sorry," Sasha whispered to herself. Sasha couldn't turn around, though. She was encapsulated by the deepness of the man's gray eyes. "I've been looking for them for a long time." His voice morphed into an echo that continued as he picked up the shovel and continued to dig. "What are you hoping to find?" Sasha felt her voice growing even smaller as she asked, already knowing the answer. "Where they buried my friends. I've been looking for so long." His voice echoed once more against the quietness of the atmosphere. The man wasn't looking at her. He was digging so intently that she thought he would break the shovel blade. "I have to find them." Who buried them? She almost couldn't believe she'd asked it. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. What is this place? The man continued on as if he hadn't heard her, throwing dirt every which way, causing Sasha to step back a few paces, but she was still unable to scream or run away. "Auskela ilaha." The man's voice boomed as he dug more intensely, and the words echoed once more. "Auskela ilaha." She could see the veins pulsating in his arms as he dug so deep into the earth that he created an opening big enough to be buried within. The man groaned and staked the shovel into the ground, turning around furiously to meet Sasha's eyes. "I've been looking for so long, ever since I went here." "Where's here?" "Johnson Indian Reform School," he said gruffly. Those words cut like a knife, and she felt a sharp pain in her head, followed by bright flashes. Sasha was overwhelmed by images of bare, dark-skinned children, walking in straight lines, and a dark-robed nun behind them with a whip. She saw images of a long-haired man as a young boy with the same shovel, digging into the earth and weeping loudly. Sasha saw the black bear standing on its hind legs and roaring at the sky. Then there was nothing but silence and complete darkness. When darkness was gone, she woke up on the curb of a completely different street that she now recognized. Sasha rose and looked around frantically to see a street filled with Sunday morning drivers and churchgoers. The buildings were gone. The silence was gone. The long-haired man was gone too. Now, even the slow sounds of Sunday morning in Winstead felt overwhelming. She looked at the church and it made her queasy. Either she wasn't well, or everyone around her was willfully ignorant of the horrific history that lurked within the town. Sasha wasn't sure what was worse, so she went back to Jade and Colt's house, too fright-sick to look in the backyard or take any shortcuts. "We tried to call you," Jade explained, as a pale-faced Sasha stumbled into the house. She threw her arms around Sasha and pulled her tight. "You need to learn to charge your phone, girl." "Yeah," Sasha murmured. Even Colt looked concerned, and was reading something on his phone. "Looks like you did something last night, Sash." He handed her his phone. It was a Silver Alert text about a man named Tera Morgan who had wandered away from a retirement facility about 24 hours ago. He was described as 6'5", with long silver hair. Sasha bit her lip, her hands shaking against her jeans. "I think you saw this guy. I'm not sure what he was doing in our backyard, but he's exactly how you described him. He's..." Those words were all Sasha managed to say before she sat on the couch. Colt and Jade suggested reporting what she saw to the local authorities. All she could do was nod. She felt too frightened to express what she had seen or to even rationalize it, even to Jordan, who would believe her at the drop of a hat. It wasn't until days later, when Sasha was back home, that she mustered the willpower to search for Johnson Indian Reform School. To her surprise and disappointment, she found the Foreign Mission School in Cornwall and the Moors Indian Charity School in Lebanon, but no combination of the words matching Johnson Indian Reform School. Perhaps the man she saw attended one of those schools, or was just old and confused. Perhaps she felt such an intense connection with him that she imagined what she had seen. Perhaps it was just an old man with dementia who mixed up stories from other family members or legends. Sasha searched as intensely as she saw the long-haired man digging that day, but no results were rendered. Perhaps it was best to just try and forget the disturbing images that she had seen and heard. No matter how hard she tried, Sasha couldn't forget about Tera Morgan, the Johnson Indian Reform School, or anything else that she had seen. She stayed over at Colt and Jade's place as an excuse to search the neighborhood for the man or the street with the old factory buildings. The trouble was, Winstead had many streets with old factory buildings, but none of them were shaped like old schools or town halls. Colt and Jade asked where she would go when she walked, but she never said. Each time she tried, she heard Tera Morgan's voice echoing, "I'm looking for my friends." Sometimes she felt the urge to help him. One time, the urge was so strong that she wanted to call the retirement facility and ask for him by name, but something stopped her. His name, his story, his figure felt too real and unreal simultaneously to make contact. One night at Colt and Jade's, many months after the encounter, she sat on the back porch, chewing an inordinate amount of gummies to her chagrin. It was the first time that Sasha was able to laugh and smile in a long time. But this time, Colt and Jade knew they couldn't stop her and just settled for the fact that she was happy and silly enough to joke around again. It was nice to join in on the silly conversation and make fun of Jordan and his crazy ghost adventures together. They were so busy sharing the gummies and staring at the stars that they hadn't even noticed the black bear that had come stumbling into the backyard, this time on all fours. "Oh my God," Colt said, tensing up and whispering sharply. "Sasha, be real quiet and don't do anything." "Yeah, Sash," Jade said, grabbing her by the shoulder. "Please don't do anything stupid. Hey, what's that in its mouth?" The bear had something white and pointy in his mouth that was rounded on its end. Sasha's jovial mood turned into one of complete silence as she stared at the pointy figure. and into the bear's gray eyes. She hadn't looked into the bear's eyes the first time she saw it. Now Sasha sat quietly until the bear seemed to nod at them and slip into the narrow opening of the woods. After it left, and after what seemed like an eternity, Sasha turned in a hushed tone. "I think he found his friends."
Whew. Well, you've been working as hard as I have lately. Sometimes the days when you can just relax and listen to the rain hit the roof are the ones you find yourself looking forward to the most. You know what I mean? This next story comes to us from TheGupie, and it's about a part of town that maybe we don't often think about, a part of town that might be underground. So let's hear a story about the Warrens.
When I went to college, I made a tactical decision and paid a ton of money to get an apartment 15 minutes from campus. My logic was that if I was close, I could walk everywhere and pay nothing for gas. In the long term, I'd probably save money. This worked out quite well at first. Then they started appearing. The beggars. At first, only one sitting behind a petrol station. Then, in my second year, there were 4. It's my 4th year now, and there are 9. Now, don't take me for some kind of monster, but these people were a massive problem. At first it was fine, just a simple, "Sorry, I got nothing," when they asked for money. Then they started burrowing into the surroundings. A small shack in some bushes, another in a park, and a big one behind the transformer. This was worrying, but not too big a deal, right? It's cold outside. Then the piles started. They would gather up every scrap of trash around, and even started scrounging through other people's trash cans, grabbing anything they could drag as their prizes back to their burrows. They would pile up this garbage and live in the filth. Soon my commute to campus started to stink. Then the rats came. Massive, furry forms, clambering across piles of filth, skittering through the darkness. I was honestly starting to worry for my health, and wondering how they would survive such unsanitary conditions. What bothered me most, though, was the one right off the main road, the road I had to take to get to class. On that road, an old power transformer sat. It was quite an interesting thing. It sat right up against the dirt slope, and on 2 sides facing the slope it had brick walls, and on the other 2 it had wire fence. One particularly inventive beggar found a way to tear a nice hole in the front fence and burrow in. Now that small area is about 30% trash. With one corner blocked off with sheet metal, he made himself quite a nice little filth shack in there. The rats are particularly bad there too, especially since he's taken to living with the vermin. Whenever I need to pass through the street, I make sure to stay on the other side of the road, as far as possible. This doesn't really help though, since the rats are everywhere on the street. What has me really worried is that machine distributes power to the area, and with the amount of trash and human waste in there, it's absolutely going to start a fire at some point. Then one day, my prediction came true. I stayed a little bit late on campus, using the library to study for upcoming exams. The sun was dipping underneath the horizon, although it could hardly be seen under the dark, looming clouds. A frigid wind blew past, filling my nose with thick, humid air. It would definitely be raining tonight. I hurried out the gate and started my trek back home, a backpack slung over my shoulder. As I turned down that dodgy road, I noticed a thick wisp of smoke rising upwards, only to be blown away by the strong wind. Yeah, I dismissed the smoke. It was probably cold, and started a fire to keep himself warm. I hurried down the road, but as the transformer came into view, I knew I was wrong. Sharp buzzes and electrical arcs were coming from the transformer, and the pungent smell of burnt plastic wafted out. I quickly dashed across the empty road. making my way towards the transformer. I wanted to get a closer look and call the emergency services if needed. When I got in front of the transformer, I was greeted by a truly horrific scene. 7 flaming rat bodies greeted me. Their sharp teeth bit through key electrical wires of the machine, setting them and the trash below alight, casting a dazzling array of electrical arcs over the machine. I reached back to my backpack, searching for my phone. Then it blared out, a guttural scream of pain coming from inside the small shack. I can't say why I did what I did next. My brain kind of shut down and I just reacted. Next thing I knew, I was crawling under the hole in the fence, pushing through rancid trash and God knew what else. Quickly made my way into the small metal shack. Having taken a first aid course, I was hoping I could help the man. A smart person would have just called an ambulance, but me being an idiot, I thought I could just rush in there. When I squeezed through the makeshift door, which was just a hole between the sheet metal and the wall of the roof, I entered a small trash-filled room. But, to my surprise, the room was empty. I looked around, searching for the injured man, but nothing was there. Just the buzz of electricity. I was confused. I definitely heard a scream. After a few seconds of nothing, I turned around. Maybe he was outside. And walked back. Crash! My stomach jumped into my lungs as the ground gave way beneath me. I instantly closed my eyes, shielding my head as I was dragged down into the ground and tossed about by tons of sinking soil and concrete. Eventually, when the impact stopped, I opened my eyes. I was in a dark tunnel, covered in layers of dirt and trash. My entire body ached. My head was pounding. I looked around, but it was pitch black. Fortunately, my dumbass didn't leave my backpack behind, so after some fumbling in the dark, I brought out my phone. The screen had a nasty crack along the length, but it luckily turned on, and with a button press, my torch blared to life, filling the dark tunnel with blinding white light. Motes of dust swirled around me, and the thick air illuminated by the beam of my torch. It looked like I was in an old sewer tunnel, probably a decommissioned one, judging by the lack of running water. Instead, I was surrounded by dull red brick, about 4 feet high. Behind me was a pile of dirt. Above me, the expressway down. I was completely blocked in, sealing me here underground. Turning to my phone, I quickly dialed 911, only to be greeted with a no signal message. Great, I thought. Okay, calm down. I took a deep breath, trying to slow down the drumbeat in my heart. This is probably a sewer pipe, which means I can go forward until I find a hatch or something to get out. I took a moment to examine myself, looking for major injuries or broken bones. All in all, I seemed to be mostly fine, just a few minor lacerations. However, what had me really worried was the lump on the back of my head, the dizziness, and the fact that I couldn't smell anything. I rationalized that it was hopefully just a concussion, so I needed to get out and get some medical attention. So up I got, hunched over, and slowly made my way down the dark tunnel. As I walked, the air remained thick with dust, causing me to cough every few steps, leaving me lightheaded. I slowly stumbled down the pipe, with every step fighting the intense feeling of claustrophobia. The walls seemed so close together, every part of me wanted to stand up and stretch out. But the tons of dirt above me pressed down, keeping me hunkered over, filling me with dread. I could swear the tunnel was getting narrower. Slowly, I made my way. Minutes passed. Then, suddenly, I was in pitch blackness. I panicked and slammed my head into the roof, knocking me to my knees and dropping my phone. I fumbled around the floor, looking for my phone, when my hand came in contact with something warm and fuzzy. With a squeak, pain shot through my hand, and I scurried back, screaming. It took me a few seconds to get a hold of myself, until I could get back to my senses and realize it was probably just a rat. My ragged breathing echoed around me, but it didn't mask the dim squeak. Okay, that's good, right? If there's life, then there must be a way out, I said in a panic. I scooted back down the tunnel, so now I have no idea where my phone might have landed. I spent several minutes trying to find it, but I couldn't. Couldn't find any more rats either. So I did the only thing I could. I scrambled forward in total darkness. I was down in the darkness for a long time. As I stumbled forward, my coughing got worse and more frequent. It was difficult to breathe, and I was practically panting, while my thoughts only served to make things worse. What if I passed an exit only to miss it in the dark? What if I never got out? Would anyone ever look for me down here? Eventually, a small, dim light filled my vision. I scrambled forward, rushing towards the light, leading me to the end of the tunnel. It ended with a sheer drop, about 2 meters down into a larger chamber. The chamber was around 20 meters long and 5 meters wide, lined with several similar tunnels. They fit into a channel and ran down the length of the room, further down into a large opening. Along the side of the room, across from my pipe, sat a rusted metal door. Above the door sat a simple, glowing bulb, barely illuminating the chamber. Relief flooded me as I scrambled out of the pipe and fell into the chamber, slamming hard into the cold stone. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the ceiling for a few minutes, letting the now clearer air fill my oxygen-deprived lungs. Then I noticed it, billowing from the pipe that was now much thicker and dustier with air, and something clicked in me. It's smoke, not dust. Somewhere in the darkness of the tunnel, smoke from the transformer fire must have filled the pipe. I slowly sat up, realizing now that I was in more danger than I knew. Then my heart nearly stopped as a loud noise filled the chamber. It came from slightly ahead, near the larger channel at the end of the room. I started examining my surroundings closer, and there he was, the small beggar living above the tunnel. He lay on his side, clutching his stomach, covered in filthy rags. I hobbled closer to him, examining him more carefully and asking, "Sir, are you okay?" He looked terrible, filthy, completely covered in filth. He looked malnourished with sunken eyes. Looking closer at his face, thin rivers of blood ran from his mouth, and I could swear his irises were blood red and dimly glowing. But he seemed unfocused, almost like he was asleep. Then he screamed again, clutching his stomach tighter. I rushed over to him, pressing 2 fingers to his neck and trying to get a reading on his vitals. As I touched him, he started to spasm, to scream, slam his fist into his stomach. I grabbed his wrist and pinned him down until he stopped trying to hurt himself. Then I heard something horrifying, chittering, tearing, liquid splashing behind me. I turned around to examine the source of the sound. It was his stomach, a now gaping hole, spilling out a torrent of long rats. However, these weren't normal rats. They looked like babies, large, pink, with thin patches of fur. I screamed and jumped back. The man contained an unbelievable number of rats, as at least 50 poured out of him. These baby rats started to continue past me, heading towards the pipe, leading down into the channel. I looked at their destination, and my blood ran cold. Thousands of glowing red eyes stared up at me. But most of these sat at least 2 feet above the ground. Then a loud scurrying echoed out behind me. I tore my eyes away from the sea of eyes, peering behind me to see more of these giant rats, cloaked in shadows, quickly surrounding me, pouring out from the pipe. I screamed, "Stay back!" swinging my backpack towards the swarm, trying to scare them off, but they didn't move. They only kept filling in the mass that surrounded me. They were barely visible, except for their blood-red eyes staring at me. Those eerie eyes followed my every move, but they didn't react. Then, when the last baby rat entered the swarm, they shifted, making a path leading from the depths of the channel. Then it came walking down the path, standing on 2 legs, hunched over about 4 feet tall. a gray-haired rat thing. It was hunched over, supporting its weight on an ancient stone staff. He slowly hobbled down the path and moved to the front of the swarm, keeping watch of me with his hideous eyes. Then, to my shock, the rat began to slowly sway from side to side and began to sing in a soft, high-pitched voice. O magna, niclem, delecto crescio nostro, do nabis potimus autumn, punit illinus qui illuc averse sunt gratis si, agros venius equinis, carnisium donus nabre, vitam novum dona nibres. After it finished the last verse, it started from the beginning again, but more voices filled in, more and more, each repeating, and soon a chorus of rat voices filled the chamber. Over and over they sang their song, and I found my eyes slowly drifting closed. I couldn't fight it. Then out of nowhere, the chamber began to rumble, small rocks and dirt cascading from the ceiling as a 7-foot gout of flame burst out of the pipe from which I had entered the chamber. It filled the room with blinding light and poured thick black smoke. The explosion must have scared the rats because they started to flee, running towards me and down the chamber. Seeing the wall of giant rats charge me, I bolted too, heading towards the door, feeling sharp claws tearing at my legs as I ran through the fleeing swarm. Finally grabbed the handle of the rusted door and yanked it open, bursting into the corridor. Seeing a ladder on the wall before me, I leaned upward. I grabbed the rusty rungs and yanked myself upward as smoke poured in after me. I could barely breathe, but I forced myself up, eventually coming to a manhole cover above me. I slammed into it, knocking it open, and throwing myself onto the cold tar of a street only 5 blocks from my home. I ran home as fast as I could, breathing hard, bleeding from multiple wounds, coughing all the way, and barely staying conscious. I finally got home and started banging on my neighbor's door. He opened it with an annoyed expression until he saw what state I was in. I asked, "Sam, I need an ambulance. I lost my phone." The next few days, I barely remember. Sam got me to a hospital, and I wound up in the ER. They gave me rabies shots, tetanus shots, half a dozen other shots, x-rays, MRIs, the whole works. Thankfully, my insurance covered everything. I told the doctors about the events. I told them that they needed to call the police and investigate the chamber. The police came and had a long chat with me and the doctors, then came to the conclusion that what I saw was PTSD coupled with oxygen deprivation, and recommended a good shrink. Then I was discharged and I made my way back home. That was a month ago. First, I tried to trust the doctors, believing it was all my imagination. I tried, but I'm not so sure anymore. You see, I found myself collecting trash. I didn't realize it at first until trash day, when I couldn't throw anything away. Now there's a little pile in my room. I just can't bring myself to get rid of it. I also found myself humming the Rats tune. I didn't even notice it at first until someone pointed it out to me. Then last night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I could swear I hear them, scurrying deep below me, singing that damn song. I don't know what to do.
Listening to the rain, hearing the crackling fire, just being warm and cozy, always puts me in a mood for a nap. What doesn't these days, though, I suppose. This next one comes to us from RichardSaxon, and it's another very classic setting for a horror story. So let's hear about the walls of the basement.
I lay weeping in bed, trying my best to keep my sobs to an absolute minimum, lest I wake up my father and suffer another beating. Only moments before, I'd been scratched badly by the satanic spawn we call a cat. Not to give anyone the wrong idea, Even at the age of 4, I loved animals, but this creature was something else entirely, scooped out from my dead uncle's apartment, feral, full of hatred. At the smallest provocation, it would dig its claws into our skin, which was, of course, the reason that my father forced it to sleep in my room. Afraid my blood would stain the sheets, I snuck down into the kitchen to wash myself off as quietly as I could. I shivered as I passed the basement door, hearing the familiar groans emerging from the depths. My mother had blamed the sounds on the wind, but without any windows or even the faintest of drafts to pull through, something about it was clearly wrong. The cat rushed past my legs, hissing as it rushed under the sofa. I hated that creature and the connection to my father that it represented. I ignored it and proceeded into the kitchen. I turned the tap on just enough for a few drops of water to pour onto my dripping wound. It burned as I cleaned it, but I couldn't even let out a mild yelp in pain. I couldn't risk waking my parents up. I carefully tore a piece of paper towel from its roll, checking behind me in fear. Then I heard a sound emerging from the entrance, sending a wave of panic down my spine as I worried that I might have woken my parents up, despite my best efforts. But the fear was immediately replaced with relief as I realized it was just the basement door creaking open. With a slightly damaged frame, it tended to slide open at random points throughout the day and night. Small taps echoed through the living room as I heard the cat rush down into the basement. The last time it had been let in there, it somehow broke its leg on the way down. Another event where the fault was placed on me. If my father somehow figured out that I'd let him down there again, he'd know that I'd been out at night, which meant I'd face hell in the morning. So as much as I hated the creature, I had to venture down into the basement and retrieve him before he damaged himself. I hid the paper towel in my pajama pants, leaving no trace behind as I followed the little beast down into the basement. As I reached the door that stood ajar, I could hear him hissing from the bottom of the staircase. A part of me worried he might scratch or even bite me again, but I'd rather suffer 1,000 cuts from his claws than another beating from my so-called guardian. I proceeded, taking a single slow step down the creaky staircase. The cat was silent, but a new sound had taken its place. A bizarre, squishing sound, akin to meat being pushed through an old, hand-driven grinder, coupled with heavy breathing. Still I continued, too worried about the consequences if I refused. Cracking sounds followed, crunch after crunch, echoing up the stairs. Then, stepping on a rotten piece of wood, the step broke, sending me plummeting down the rest of the stairs. I roughly landed on the concrete floor below. By then, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. In a mixture of pain and fear, I started to sob, crying loudly in the darkness, alone, as the night hung around me. My only solace was that the sounds in the basement might not be making it up to the bedroom where my parents slept. Maybe I'd even be allowed to weep in peace. But reality begged to differ, as a presence in the darkness had awoken. "Why are you crying, child?" a deep, raspy voice asked. I turned around, trying to figure out where the sound had come from. Hadn't been either of my parents, I knew that much, yet it felt oddly familiar. "Here," it let out a mere whisper. The sound had come from a wall in the darkest corner of the basement, one just barely touched by the faint moonlight daring to shine in from the living room above. Only then did the metallic stench and scent of rotted meat hit my nostrils, causing me to recoil in disgust. On the floor lay a pool of fresh blood, shining gently in the dimmest of lights. It had come from the cat, I could gather that much, but the rest of the body was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Smokey?" I asked with a trembling voice. "You cared for such a creature?" the voice asked, seeming curious. "No, I hate it," I let out in protest, almost angered by the mere statement. "Then why do you want to find it? I've witnessed the pain it causes you. I've heard your cries." He belongs to my dad. He'll be angry at me." "My apologies. I required sustenance." Though young, I was well familiar with the concept of death, and with a pool of blood before me and its accompanying stench assaulting me, I realized there was no turning back. I started crying again, knowing how badly I'd messed up. "What am I gonna do?" I sobbed. Who even are you?" Who am I?" it repeated. "I don't know." The peculiar statement somehow put a stop to my whines. It was such an odd concept to me, to my young mind, that a sentient being that was able to talk didn't have an identity that it was aware of. You don't know?" I asked. "No. Who are you?" it asked in return. I'm Helena. Why don't you have a name?" "I was never given one." "Why not?" "No person has ever acknowledged my presence. I've been alone for millennia." My childhood mind was easily distracted. Presented with such a unique, bizarre situation, I could refocus my mind away from the horrors that would undoubtedly await me in the morning. The verbal abuse, even the beatings, were forgotten, if even momentarily. How about I give you a name?" I asked, starting to feel almost comforted by the being's unexplained presence. "What name will you bestow upon me?" I let out a sound as I mulled over the best name a 4-year-old could conjure. "How about Leo?" I suggested, stealing the name from one of my favorite cartoons. "Yes, Leo will suffice," said the voice. And so, that night, an extraordinarily bizarre friendship began. Living far out on the countryside, with close to no kids my own age, I really hadn't grown up with anyone other than the occasional stray animal that wandered onto our land. Having someone I could talk to without fear of a beating made me feel the first ounce of happiness I'd experienced during my albeit short stay on this earth. Oddly enough, when providing an excuse to my parents that the cat had escaped through a window at night, I wasn't punished all too severely. In fact, they both seemed relieved that the monster had vanished from our house. The traces of blood that tainted the basement had all but vanished in the night, seeming to fade in the morning. Following that event, I took it upon myself to feed Leo. I'd usually go down to the basement at night and spend a few hours after dark talking to him. I fed him whatever scraps of meat we had left behind the fridge, which he appreciated, as he told me stories of a world I hadn't the faintest chance of comprehending. I quickly learned that only flesh would sustain him. He explained to me that the fresher the meat was, the better. But to get a hold of food, I had to be sneaky. Usually I'd wait for my dad to come home from work. He'd always stop by the bar and have a few drinks, and would end up getting pretty drunk. I could smell the alcohol reeking off of him as he stumbled into the living room, only to pass out on the couch. Once I heard him snoring, I'd sneak into the kitchen, put some crumbs on a plate, which I placed next to him on the sofa, and feed the rest to the kind beast that lived in the basement. Doing that, my father would usually wake up in a drunken slumber in the middle of the night, thinking he'd mindlessly consume something before passing out. For 3 years, the strategy worked. My father still remained the scum of the earth he'd always been, but he was none the wiser about the fact that I had a friend living in the basement walls. Over the years, he'd even begun to grow. His voice had gotten more prominent. Even a mouth had formed in the wall, one filled with jagged, rotting teeth. Every day I fed him, a task growing progressively more difficult as he grew larger. Inevitably, the food stolen from the fridge would be too much. Just before my 9th birthday, Leo had asked for a larger meal. I stole the majority of a leftover rotisserie chicken, but as I stumbled back to the basement, the snores emerging from my father's mouth abruptly stopped. "What are you doing, you little shit?" he asked, angry at me before he even realized what was going on. But then he saw the chicken, obviously thinking I was about to steal it for myself. "Just what do you think you're doing?" I wasn't, I stuttered. What followed was the same cascade of drunken abuse I knew all too well, followed by a few slaps to the face, leaving behind red marks and black eyes. I took it all, knowing there was nothing I could do to justify my action, knowing I was too weak to defend myself, and knowing my mother feared the man just as much as I did. I was alone, left with no one in the world to protect me. No one except for Leo. "Why are you crying?" he asked as I greeted him that night. "What has happened?" It's my dad," I began, unable to continue between sobs. "I couldn't get you the food. I'm sorry." "Let me punish him." It was a suggestion he'd made on several occasions, but I'd rejected it every time. "I can't," I repeated. "Why would you defend a man who has caused you nothing but suffering since the day you emerged into this world?" he asked, almost sounding disappointed. For a moment, I wondered what our lives would be like without Dad. If my mom and I could finally find some semblance of peace without that monster looming above us, maybe I had just finally reached my breaking point, or maybe I was starting to lose empathy as I aged. Whatever the case, on that day, I finally agreed to let the wall in my basement take care of my greatest problem. "How?" I asked. With that, we formed a simple yet effective plan. Making my father enter the basement, however, remained the biggest hurdle. It had been moldy and wet for decades, and had even been left empty since before I was born. My dad had no reason to go into the basement unless I tricked him, that was. In addition, I had to do it on a day my mother wasn't home. Months would pass by before the opportunity arose, but when it did, I quickly set my plan to motion. As usual, my father returned late at night from the bar, and I patiently waited for him to pass out in a drunken stupor. Once he was asleep, I took the few toys I had, strewed them across the living room floor with a trail leading down into the basement. I could have just hidden down there, loudly announcing my presence. But even though I knew what had to be done, I wasn't brave enough to witness the act itself. All I needed was for the man himself to think I was down there. Sure enough, as soon as he woke up, still slightly drunk, he noticed the mess. Calling my name and receiving no response, he walked along the trail, kicking and breaking the toys as he passed. All the while, he demanded that I show myself. What he didn't realize was that I was hiding in the untouched guest room, peeking through the crack in the door. I stared out in anticipation, only to notice my father hesitate as he reached the top of the basement stairs. "Helena, just come up. I'm not mad at you. I just want to talk," he said in a slightly softer voice. He spoke almost with care, too afraid to venture down into the basement, as if he too knew that something beyond his comprehension lurked down there, a being that just didn't belong to our world. "Come on, I'm waiting," he went on. In response, a quiet laugh emerged from the basement. While it wasn't mine, it didn't sound like Leo's either, as if he were attempting to mimic me. In fact, I wasn't sure I'd ever heard my friend laugh like that before, nor did I know that he was capable of humor. Still, the laugh sent my father into a blind rage. Screaming my name, promising beatings, he went charging into the basement. In the clear, I rushed out of my hiding spot and jammed a chair under the door handle. He was trapped now. There was no way out. "What in the hell?" my father began, but his voice quickly turned to blood-curdling screams as the wall got to work on him. His bones cracked, his flesh was torn to shreds as the man screamed in absolute agony. I covered my ears, almost daring to regret what I had done. Though I held no love for the man, it pained me to hear him helplessly beg for his life. As soon as the yelling had begun, they turned to incomprehensible gurgles as blood filled his lungs. Before long, silence once again filled the empty house, and a sense of uneasy peace filled my soul. "Dad?" I called out, checking if I'd get a response. "Leo?" I went on. Still nothing. Afraid of the sight that might meet me in the basement, I remained upstairs, sitting in front of the door, half expecting something terrible to emerge from the dark. Hours passed. My mother eventually returned home from another night shift, finding me on the couch, pale as a sheet. "Where's your father?" she asked, too tired to notice the rough state I was in. "I don't know," I said meekly, sure she'd figure out what I'd done. But all I got in return was an unenthusiastic, "Huh," before she went to sleep. Even when her husband failed to show himself in the morning, she didn't seem to care all that much, as if his absence didn't bother her. While it wasn't unusual for him to stay out drinking until the middle of the night, he almost always showed up in the early morning. A couple of days turned into a week, and my father still hadn't shown up. Though suspicious at first, Mom started to appear more at ease, almost daring to smile. It wasn't until the second week before she finally decided to inform the police. Not because we missed him, but because it would seem suspicious if we didn't. It wasn't the first time they'd been to our house, seeing how the old man treated us all. But as soon as they appeared, he'd become a model citizen, and he'd always find a way to make Mom forgive him. Without charges to press, we were left to suffer his abuse. No proper investigation was ever launched. It was simply assumed that the man had abandoned us, a situation that suited us well. During the next few years, my mom and I would finally get a chance to bond, and my life started to improve. Bit by bit, the memories of the nightmarish childhood I'd had began to fade. Of course, Leo remained my secret friend up through my formative teenage years. But with his appetite ever growing, feeding him became somewhat of a problem. Where scraps and raw meat had once sufficed, he now wanted fresh kills. I resorted to getting a part-time job at a local butcher, sneaking out what little I could and using the rest of my salary to buy game meat from hunters and farms. For a short while, the meat sufficed. It could sustain the growing being in our basement. For every day that passed, more and more distinctive features formed. Arms, fingers, claws. Leo kept getting bigger, almost taking up the entirety of the basement wall. And as time passed, it became abundantly clear that my effort alone wasn't enough to satiate his ever-growing hunger. "I require sustenance," he begged. "I just fed you," I argued back. "I need more," he almost yelled, his voice echoing through the basement. By this time, eyes had formed alongside the mouth, the spikes emerging around the wall, forming a primitive facial structure. What do you want, then? I don't have much money left." "I long for the taste of living flesh. Pink, warm skin, trembling muscles, soft fat." You're talking about," I began, not really daring to finish the sentence.
Humans, he went on, finishing the thought for me.
I'm not a murderer. Hearing my mother in the parking lot outside, I ended the argument and rushed upstairs. Leo had been my guardian for all these years, saving me from an abusive household, but I wasn't about to murder anyone for his sake. Not again. For the next few days, I'd tossed the meat down into the basement without talking to him, upset with his evolving desires. I started spending more time in my room, far enough away that I couldn't hear the soft whispers. But ignoring the creature would not be an option. One day, while chatting with a friend on the phone, I heard a voice calling me from downstairs. "Helena," Mom called. I ran down to check what she needed, met with a puzzled expression on her face. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing. I just thought I heard you calling me from the basement. Did you want to speak to me or something?" Knowing I hadn't said anything, it didn't take me long to realize exactly what had called her name. But not willing to tell her the truth, my thoughts raced to come up with a suitable excuse. I was talking on the phone. You must have misheard me," I lied. But she believed me, having no reason to mistrust me on such a pointless lie. That night, I waited for my mom to fall asleep before I ventured down into the depths of the basement. My heart was filled with a mixture of fear and anger. The creature I had once named friend had attempted to murder my mother. "You returned," Leo said softly, almost surprised at my presence. "You tried to kill my mother," I said, jumping straight to the point. "I must consume flesh," he said, sounding almost weak, his words quieter than usual. "I'm famished." "I've been feeding you the same thing I always have, ever since we first met." "It no longer satisfies. I require unspoiled flesh. I require living meat." "No," I said firmly, "I'm not doing this anymore." "You would allow me to perish." "I'll keep feeding you animal meat, but I'm not going to kill anyone for your cravings. And I can't forgive you for trying to kill my mom." Leo didn't respond, seemed to contemplate my harsh words. I had already decided to end our friendship, but I wasn't ready to let him die. So I'd keep tossing down some hunted game purchases from local farmers or hunters without entering the basement. That way I could avoid engaging in any sort of conversation with him. Only then I could live with a semi-clean conscience. For months and years I fed the beast, never speaking a single word. During the nights I could hear him groan and beg for flesh, but I refused to listen. It was a miracle that my mother never caught on, but in her advancing years her hearing had started to fade, and her mind with it. Though she'd barely entered her 50s, the years of alcohol to deal with the trauma caused by my father had worn on her soul, and though I'd tried to get her help, she never really recovered. Then, one day, as I returned home from work, my mother was no longer there to greet me. I found her body in bed. She had passed away while taking a nap. There she lay, looking as if she was just sleeping, but entirely different. Lighter, tired, absent. I did what I could in a futile attempt at resuscitation, but her body was already cold. There was nothing left to be done. It was determined during the autopsy that she'd passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her heart had grown tired and simply ceased to beat. I could take comfort in the fact that she never saw it coming, that she at least experienced a handful of semi-happy years before leaving this world. With her gone, though, I was truly alone. So another year passed, and I remained alone in my inherited house, someplace I knew wasn't truly empty. Once I entered college, I even started dating, meeting a guy, Martin, who seemed to tick all the boxes. Time passed, and though the memories lingered, they appeared as painless scars, serving as little more than reminders of old wounds sustained. For a while we were happy. He had just finished college by the time I entered my freshman year. I was 19 and he was 24. He was a private man who moved here from a couple of states over, finding work at a local bar. He never talked about his past, nor why he'd left everything he knew behind, which should have been the first sign of things to come, had I only been wise. Growing up, seeing my mother get hit by my father, I always judged her for choosing a man who would hurt her like that. Though I felt guilty, I couldn't help but pity her for staying. I never thought in a million years that I'd be stupid enough to fall into a similar trap. Oh, how naive I was. As it turned out, mistakes can cross the boundary of generations and can be repeated no matter how careful you think you are. Martin first hit me during what he felt was an innocuous argument. He didn't even seem that angry, so I never saw it coming. Too in shock, I couldn't even respond. A man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with had just put his hands on me. But I was in too deep to just leave. It started with outbursts, followed by profuse apologies and love bombing. Then the cycle would repeat. Step by step, my freedom was taken from me. I couldn't dress the way I wanted. I couldn't spend time with my friends. At some point, I wasn't even allowed to leave the house without supervision. It happened so fast, I almost suffered whiplash. Before I knew it, he had taken full control of my life. The man who had entered my house might as well have been the reincarnation of the man I'd called father. No sooner had that realization hit me than I decided I wasn't going to take the abuse lying down. I started to form an escape plan. I still had some money from my inheritance, not enough for a luxurious lifestyle, but enough to leave town and never look back. Martin could have the house for all I care, a place haunted by decades of abuse and cursed beyond the ability of cleansing. I just needed to find the perfect time for my escape. I chose the date, waited for Martin to leave for work, and started packing my bags without hesitation. He never returned home early since he didn't have flexible work hours, nor did he ever call in sick, enjoying the attention he got from drunk girls at the bar. If only they knew the monster he truly was. But as I tore down the shelves in a frantic attempt to make a swift escape, something caught my eye. A reflection bounced off a small glass surface. A camera, hidden amongst my personal effects in the bedroom, pointed directly at the bed where my bags lay half-packed. Without having to ask, I knew Martin had been watching me from afar, which meant he'd be back home any minute. I decided to drop the rest and leave with whatever I already had, but as I ran for the door, Martin entered with a knowing, furious expression on his face. "Think you can just leave?" he yelled as he pulled the bags out of my hand. I tried to push him away, and though I was no weakling, he was far larger. I didn't stand a chance. "How do you not understand this?" he said as he grabbed my arm and started pulling me back into the house. "You belong to me." I continued to fight back to the best of my ability, twisting around, punching him, all to no avail. Then, with one final push, he pulled my shoulder out of joint. "Let me go," I half demanded, half begged between screams of agony. Then, not sure where to put me, he opted for the room closest to our struggle, the one most easily locked up. The basement. A room I knew lay barren, but one that had never been empty. He ripped open the door and pushed me inside, letting me roll down the stairs towards the bottom, where I remained on the floor, battered, bruised, and with a dislocated shoulder. "I don't want to hurt you, but you really left me with no choice," he said, before closing and locking the door behind him. I was trapped. Lying on the floor, I cried, like I had so many years ago, the first time I'd met Leo at the ripe old age of 4. Just like then, the beast answered, ready to hear my pleas for help. "Why do you cry, child?" the voice called out, weaker than I'd ever heard it before. "Not a child anymore, and still nothing has changed," I responded. "But you are still so little. I can help you," Leo went on, a suggestion I was all too familiar with. "Not this time. I can't keep fighting anymore. Just let it be over." "No," Leo exclaimed, much louder than before. "It is not your time. You must continue your journey." "Why?" I asked. "What's the point?" "Your purpose is yet to be revealed." "What does that even mean?" "Keep fighting." "I can't." "You will. I'm too weak to fight him." "You are not alone." "Why would you help me after I abandoned you?" My voice trailed off. But before Leo could respond, the door shot open and Martin stumbled in, a gun in his hand, one I didn't even know he owned. "I hate that it had to come to this," he began as he walked down the stairs, "but I can't exactly keep you down here forever. This'll be easier on both of us." With one arm refusing to cooperate, I pushed myself up and crawled towards the basement wall, knowing full well I had no chance of outrunning a bullet. But Martin would want to make it personal. He wouldn't attack from a distance. Sure enough, he descended all the way down the stairs, walking up to me with an empty look in his eye. He didn't attempt to further explain himself, nor did he offer a chance for reconciliation. In his mind, I'd betrayed him, and that was all it took. He lifted the gun and pointed it directly at my head, as if preparing to take out a rabid dog. I could only close my eyes and wait for him to pull the trigger. But such mercy would never come. Instead, the silent atmosphere was shattered by Martin's blood-curdling scream as his flesh was ripped down to the bone. I could feel his blood splatter across my face, but that time, for once, I decided not to hide from an act I had partially been responsible for. Though his demise was the consequence of his own action, I felt like I deserved some credit. I opened my eyes and saw for the first time how the creature in the wall consumed its prey. Dozens of arm-like appendages extended from that wall, tearing into him with long claws that tore through his skin, fat, and muscle as if it were butter. All he could do was scream until his chest was torn open and blood started to fill his lungs. What little remained of his rapidly expiring body was incorporated into the wall, consumed by my guardian. Then the world fell silent once more, and I was saved. "You're safe now," Leo said, softly breaking the silence. "I know. Thank you. Thank you for always being there when I needed you. Our bond will never break, and because of you, I am at last satisfied. But this does not mark the end of our coexistence. This is just the beginning." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Later, little one. I must rest." With that, Leo fell asleep, a rest I granted him as I attempted to process all the horror I'd experienced since my childhood to this day. That was the day I decided I would grant my savior whatever he desired, be it the flesh of the living or revenge on his enemies. I would let no innocent person suffer, nor would I choose at random. I would actively seek out those who deserve a gruesome death and lure them to my house, where Leo could feast. I knew it would be no easy task, but I would do it for him. Throughout my entire miserable life, he had been my one constant, the only presence that had accompanied me, I would do whatever it took. But as I descended the basement on the following day to let Leo in on the plan to serve him, I was met with an empty wall. Where Leo had once lived was a large indent in the basement's foundation, as if he had up and left. A sadness emerged in my chest as I thought the creature had abandoned me. But just the previous day he had promised that we were interconnected. It couldn't be a lie, yet as the weeks passed, the basement remained silent. Even as I tossed down whatever meat I had in the fridge, it just lay on the floor to rot. Leo, whatever he had been, was truly gone from my life. Then, reports of missing people started showing up on the news. Mostly vagrants or criminals on the run from the police, people that wouldn't be quickly missed, but in a large enough number that people started to notice. They'd just vanish without a trace. No bodies were ever found, nor did they show up in other cities or even states. Week by week, the reports kept coming in, and I knew exactly who was responsible. Leo's hunger had kept growing even after he emerged from my basement, a lust for flesh that would no longer be satisfied. Though the people didn't necessarily deserve to be consumed, I knew there was nothing in this world that could stop him. But even if I could, I'd sworn my loyalty to him. It was a thought that followed me, even as I slept in my bed at night. I wondered how far he would go before he finally consumed enough, and if the people killed deserved it, or if they were innocents that found him at the wrong time. Just as I lingered between the world of waking and the realm of sleep, a voice snatched back my attention, one that was all too familiar. "Hello, little one," Leo spoke, softly through the dark, closer than I'd ever heard him. Shooting up out of bed, I saw a dark silhouette standing there, 9 feet tall, hunched over to prevent his head from hitting the ceiling. Several arms stretched from his torso, ending in razor-sharp claws, and the stench of rotting flesh emerged with his raspy breath. "Leo?" "Yes," he responded. "I've come for you. It's time." "Time for what?" "Time to fulfill your purpose beyond this realm." What purpose?" I stuttered. "This world no longer belongs within the reach of mankind's filthy grasp. But you're different. Come with us, and I promise your safe passage to the realm of Urakala. No one will ever hurt you there. No one will ever hurt you again." "What about the people living here?" "You no longer need concern yourself with their well-being, but you must come with us now." I just stared speechlessly at the creature, the thing I had grown up calling Leo, only to realize he was something else entirely, spawned from a world I had no concept of, one focused only on conquering the world that I had grown up in. But as he patiently awaited my reply, I thought back to all the pain and suffering I'd endured, the false kindness I'd been given, only to face years of abuse. If this was the world I had, I wasn't sure it was the one I wished to protect. "What do you say, little one?" With that, my purpose became clear. The entirety of my span in this realm, the lesson it had taught me, the people I had endured, I knew exactly what to do.
One more story left, and I promise I haven't skimped out at the end. Coming to us from S.G. Woodhouse. Let's hear a story about a blast from the past. Something I used to never leave home without, at least until my Discman became a little more affordable. But this one served me well for years and years, and sometimes I miss it. So let's hear a little story about the Walkman.
I never imagined that one sentence could terrify me so much. I'm sitting in my living room, shaking and listening to the tape on my Walkman, over and over again. I don't understand what's going on. Maybe you can help me. It all started last night when I was spending the evening with some friends. There was Sam, a childhood friend, and his girlfriend, Olivia. Cedric, a friend I'd made from work. Despite his shyness at the parties like this, he was actually pretty smart. Finally, there was Brad and Mia, a couple of friends I'd known for years, who'd already started arguing on the road. Considering the murderous looks on their faces when they'd arrived, they clearly didn't want to discuss it either. "Hey, what's this?" said Sam, pointing to the Walkman on my shelf. He stood up and grabbed it. "Is that a Walkman? Are you serious? I didn't know you'd become a hipster," he said, giving a laugh. "It's nothing," I said. "Just a cool thing I bought a few days ago at the flea market. I've linked it to these speakers, but forget it. Doesn't really work anyway." "Really?" he said. And with that, he pressed the play button. I already knew what they were going to hear. At least that's what I thought at the time. "Tell me, baby, why don't you love me? Tell me, baby." Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know you could record recent music with that. Been listening to that music on loop for days, said Sam enthusiastically. I was speechless. I've been trying to fix that Walkman since the day I bought it. It already had a cassette inside when I purchased it at the flea market. For some reason, no other audio cassette would work. Even the original cassette, that worked a little bit, only repeated the same thing over and over again when I used it. Too bad. Wish we could have a little more fun together. I asked Sam to give me back the Walkman so I could have a look at it. Maybe he'd pressed something unintentional and had fixed it. I rewound the tape to the beginning and pressed play. Too bad. Wish we could have a little more fun together, said the charming voice of a man I didn't know. Well, looks like you got an admirer, Olivia teased me. I explained that since I'd bought it, the original cassette that worked had been repeating the same phrase over and over again, and that this was the first time I'd heard this song from it. It's pretty weird, Olivia admitted. She picked up the Walkman and pressed play, listening. Tell me, baby, why don't love me? Tell me, baby. I took it back, rewound the tape, and pressed play. The same smooth voice repeated the phrase I'd always heard. Too bad. Wish we had a little more fun together, it said. Cedric, you know a thing or two about electronics. Would you mind taking a look? I handed him the Walkman. He looked at it from every angle, puzzled, but still trying to come up with some kind of explanation. Finally, he took a turn and pressed play. I love you, said an older woman's voice. Wow, it's getting hotter and hotter, joked Olivia. The three of us took turns picking up the Walkman, and inexplicably, the cassette tape played something different. Still the same for each person, for all of us, apart from Olivia and Sam, who were hearing the same music. After a while, even Olivia started to feel kind of uncomfortable. Sam thought I was playing a joke on them, but it wasn't hard to demonstrate that no trickery was possible, especially with a retro device like this. Brad and Mia, who had remained silent all evening apart from a few murderous glances exchanged, had started to take an interest in the discussion. Would you like to try it? I offered, handing him the Walkman. Brad took it, and we all moved forward in our seats, curious to hear what was about to happen. After a brief glance at us, Brad pressed play. You fucking cheater! After recoiling from the tenfold increase in volume, we all slowly turned our heads towards Mia, who was standing right next to Brad. It was her voice we'd just heard screaming out of that walkman. "What is this shit? Where'd you buy this? Seriously, you've been fucking with us since the beginning of this evening. I'm sure of it. How did you do that? Did you use some kind of software or something?" spouted Mia in a rage. I didn't know what to say. I was as helpless as she was to explain why we'd just heard her screaming as he played the tape. She snatched it out of Brad's hand and pressed play. Her enraged voice came out of the speaker again, her face going white. "I've had enough of this. Let's get out of here," she said. After that, Brad and Mia left. Couldn't do anything but apologize to Brad for the way the evening had turned out. I put the Walkman away and had a few beers with Sam and Olivia and Cedric, who had decided to stay. Clearly, the evening had taken a turn for the worse, though. We were all puzzled and still stuck on what we'd heard. "Maybe it's the future we're hearing," Sam said. "I mean, considering how often they bicker, wouldn't surprise me if that's the case for them," Olivia said. "If it's the future, I don't know which one, 'cause it definitely wasn't my grandmother's voice I heard," said Cedric. There was silence. After a moment, everyone stood up, bringing a premature end to an evening that had definitely not gone the way I had planned. I invited Sam and Olivia to sleep over, knowing they had some driving to do, but as usual they declined. I told them to be careful, then waved goodbye to Cedric, who still seemed lost in thought. That night I fell asleep with an uneasy feeling and the certainty that I'd better throw away the Walkman first thing in the morning and forget the whole thing. When I woke up, I fumbled for my cell phone on the bedside table, but it wasn't there. I found it forgotten on the living room table, saw that I'd received a dozen texts and calls during the night. Couldn't make any sense of them. A voicemail had been left by a number I didn't have in my contacts. "This is Sam's mom. I can't seem to reach you. Sam and Olivia were in a terrible car accident last night. They didn't make it." I stared at the wall in front of me, incredulous as Sam's mom sobbed into the recording. She was clearly having a breakdown. There was nothing left of the car. A truck ran a red light, apparently. There was only the radio, the car radio, that kept repeating the same music over and over again. I could hear it in the background when the ambulance was there. The words she uttered next made my blood run cold. "Tell me, baby, why don't love me? Tell me, baby." I threw my cell phone on the floor. It was too obvious to be a coincidence. I'd already started to have doubts when I heard Mia's voice screaming in such rage. A murderous rage, to be sure. I've been pressing play and rewind for about an hour now. Too bad. Wish we could have a little more fun together. Every time I hear that phrase, I feel as if the suave voice of the man that I don't know is becoming more and more malevolent.
And just like that, our stories have come to an end. I hope I'll see you next time for more cozy horror with yours truly, Dr. Plague. Until then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.